We started shooting, which was like singing 4 times a week, dancing 5 times a week, writing 3 times a week. God, I think my brain would maybe explode. I feel so blessed to have already played one of my and then to get to play another one. I feel like that's almost unique to an actress to get to do that. So I was like, wow, this is I just felt incredibly lucky to have the career that I'm having. Yeah, I feel like it unlocks for people something from their childhood, something that feels so deep inside them, and like something that they've always known. It has a level of familiarity that is just so intense and special. When I talk about prep and whatever else, it was like in the build up to the movie, I really felt the pressure of that. Not just, if you look at her within sort of the category of those Disney characters, she's kind of the rogue. She kind of like, she takes a different course. That was always what I loved about Belle. Like when I think about Belle, I think about her singing Belle Reprise. I know everyone around me can't understand why I don't want what everyone else thinks that I should want and which is being handed to me, but I really just want something more. I want something else. Like, this doesn't fit, I don't fit. She kind of, like the Robert Frost poem, she takes the road less traveled. And I always really identified with that. Belle is no sheep. She's really on her own, just on her own path. That energy, that spirit was really what I identified with in her, definitely. And I think that in the end is where Beast and Belle find their common ground, is because they both feel really lonely. They both feel like outsiders in their own world. Belle is kind of trapped in her surroundings, in her village, and Beast is trapped in this castle. And there's this sort of strange mirroring, there's this strange parallel where, and that's where they start to really fall in love. Yeah, they make sense of one another for each other. What's so beautiful about the story as a whole is this idea that Belle is able to see past these extraneous, external, superficial qualities of Beast. She's able to see deeper. And that's one of her that's kind of one of her special powers, is that she can see behind his anger and frustration, see the pain and vulnerability and insecurity before she goes and meets Beast. And so I wanted to create a bit more of a backstory for her. You kind of get a little bit of a sense of why she doesn't fit in, like she likes to read books and she's not desperately in love with Gaston, but why is it that she's such an outsider? Why does she feel like she doesn't fit so much? And I really wanted to get to the bottom of that. We kind of made her this mad, wacky inventor, which was originally kind of like her father was that role, and it kind of became more about Belle to do that and add that on. Mad, she essentially creates a prototype for the first washing machine of intelligence, and anyone that, you know, is going beyond that, and they don't like anything that's foreign, unknown, that might be beyond their realm of experience. And so they really do, it's breaking the washing machine is symbolic of not just them, you know, breaking something she spent hours working on, but them really trying to break her spirit and kind of trying to kind of push her and mold her into a more acceptable version of herself. I think that happens a lot with women and a lot with young girls, where it's like, oh, that's nice, but why don't we just kind of push you this way a little bit? And like,
why don't you do what's expected or traditional?
Yeah, we prefer this aspect of your personality. Let's cultivate that area or that sort of thing that you're good at, and let's just kind of like push that side a little bit. It was very important to me that Belle try to meaningfully, you know, try to escape, and only at the point when kind of this unspoken agreement of, I'm not a prisoner anymore now, I'm here on my own terms, and I'm gonna stay with you until you get well. But there's a dynamic that really shifts. I think she can see in Beast that there's someone that has been fundamentally good, and because he's never suffered, he doesn't have any empathy. He doesn't have any empathy. He's essentially a narcissist. So in that way, I see Beast and Gaston as opposites and on opposite ends of the spectrum. That's so true. Again, I think there's like an intentional cruelty with Gaston, which is which is about building himself up by pushing others down. Whereas with Beast, there's kind of, you can tell he's being unkind because he's so unkind to himself, and he feels so terrible on the inside that
it's a defense mechanism.
Yeah, that it's a defense mechanism, and it's he doesn't see himself as being very worthy. That kind of reflects how he interacts with everyone and everything. Reading about Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is where a prisoner will take on the characteristics of and fall in love with, in this sort of really strange way, their captor. Belle actively argues and disagrees with him constantly. She has none of the characteristics of someone with Stockholm Syndrome, because she keeps her independence, of mind. And I also think that there is a very intentional switch where, in my mind, Belle decides to stay. She gives as good as she gets. You know, he bangs on the door, she bangs back, and there's this defiance that, you know, you think I'm going to come and eat dinner with you, and I'm your prisoner, I'm your cat? Absolutely not. And you know, it's only when and I think that's the other beautiful thing about the love story, is that they form a friendship first. Anyways, I actually think is more meaningful than a lot of love stories where it was love at first sight and you're dealing with all of these kind of projections. Beast and Belle begin their love story really irritating each other. Slowly, very slowly builds to them falling in love. That is a big problem with a lot of traditionally written fairy tales, is that you're like, so the girl's just gonna give up her entire existence and everything that's important to her for this guy. That's, you know, and that seems to be like this recurring theme, which is like, whoa, this is, you know, she does sing about her Prince Charming, but I think he's kind of, the sense that I got from Belle is that he's a bit of an afterthought. She's much more interested about getting out there and traveling and reading, and I think as well, like, Prince Charming is someone that comes along and understands her.
It is.
You know, it's interesting. I've done a few movies where I play, you know, someone's played my character before, or that, you know, my character exists in real life, and I've always chosen not to. I think because in the act of creation, you want to make sure that you're bringing something individual and original, and a big part of it was wanting to stay faithful to the original telling. And I hope we really got the balance right of being like, okay, we're going to offer you some new stuff that you've never seen before, but we're also going to give you the heart of the original. Oh, it was so strange. It was so emotional seeing Noma's performance in a way that I had not anticipated at all, and didn't even realize until she walked in the room and just spontaneously just burst into tears. It was such an emotional moment for me, I can't tell you. But it was such a relief, because I think I'd played that character, it was going to be okay. I know that sounds crazy, but like, to know that everything turned out all right and her forward, and it was just such a relief. It made me so happy, because otherwise, I don't know, playing someone that, I mean, we get that kind of just gets stuck in time at 20 years old, 19 years old. It's like, no, like, I wanted her to have a future. Again, it just feels so lucky to play someone that I sort of care about as much as I care about Hermione, and that kind of, in a way, does feel like an extension of there was just an instant, like, intimacy, connection. Oh, we're totally on the same, you know, yeah, it's crazy. But my mum taking me to see it when I was still pretty young, and I was horrified by the whole thing. I was like, you know, because it's such a stigmatized topic, and Eve just boldly and bravely kind of just takes a pickaxe to all of the walls, to everything. And so you end up, if you bring it up as a topic, you end up having amazing conversations with people. Yeah, I think the other thing that was really important for me about that movement was men understanding that it was also not just them helping their sisters or their friends, but kind of in a way helping or saving themselves in order to make themselves more full and more human and more whole, and you know, cherishing what we often consider to be feminine qualities, instead of kind of sweeping them under a rug or trying to pretend that they don't exist, or just generally devaluing them. What I would really love to focus on is there's a lot of missing data in that we have about women and girls, and there's a lot of these gaps that I'd love to try and fill and get some more information on, because when you can show the data on something, it makes something visible, and you know, it's very difficult to treat a problem that you just don't have.
Like what kind of problems?
Gosh, everything from sexual violence to FGM to literacy rates to everything really. Often because we often don't measure a lot of things that happen within what we consider to be the private sphere. So this year, I really want to focus on statistics and information and data collection. It seems to inherently suggest a preferential treatment of the feminine over the masculine because it has the feminine in the word, and I think that's a real oversight and a misunderstanding.
Rather than just basic fairness.
Rather than just gender, across, just gender equality across the board. This isn't girls are better than boys, boys are better than girls. This is just everyone deserves a fair chance at whatever it is. I think also because a lot of prejudice and certainly misogyny is so normalized, it's like it's right under people's noses. So when you raise it, there's kind of like we've dealt with that. Women got the vote ages ago. Like, this isn't a thing. And then when you start to kind of unravel it for people, they go, oh, I didn't think about that, or I didn't think about this. And if I were to say I was a feminist, it would be a personal attack on you as a man, as opposed to a patriarchal system, or something much larger than an individual person. I think also men think that they can't be feminists. That's a big misunderstanding. Some of the best feminists I know are men. I like to joke about the man box, which is like, you can only be a man if you fulfill these certain qualities and you stay within this square of like, you're in your man box and you're safe in the man box. And something for some men about going near feminism is a step out of the man box. No one likes to feel that there's blame attached to that word, and I think that's very difficult. Well, it's something that they're not used to, and they don't like that. Anything that deviates from the norm is difficult to accept. I think if you've been used to watching characters that look like, sound like, think like you, and then you see someone up on the screen that you go, well, that's a girl, she doesn't look like me. I want it to look like me so that I can project myself onto the character. Whereas women are great at doing that anyway. We see whoever it is on screen and we recognize the human qualities in the man that we relate to, and there's not such a gap. But for some reason, there's some kind of barrier there where they're like, I don't want to relate to a girl. Often I feel like, the superheroes that, if I asked a young boy what superhero they looked up to, I feel a lot fewer would say a female one, or would ever use an example of a
Wonder
female
Woman
one.
Or Black Widow, yeah, they wouldn't.
Than in reverse, which is a shame, because I feel like we need to live in a culture that values and respects and looks up to and idolizes women as much as men. So I think that's starting to slowly change, but it is something that I feel like it does actively need to be addressed. Hermione was that perfect example of turning on its head this initial prejudice that she gets, which is that Harry is much more intuitive. Ron is just along for the ride. So fundamentally beautiful about Hermione is her loyalty to that group of friends. In a way, she's really the glue that keeps that trio together. So her role it's fundamental, and the boys know it, and they really treat her with respect, as if they know that. The amount of positive feedback I would get from looking pretty and like putting on a nice dress and smiling nicely and doing all of that, the amount of like affirmation and validation that would come with me spending time doing that versus studying for months and reading something interesting and being passionate about something and talking about it. I mean, that would barely get a side glance. But like, this is really depressing. Like, I've put so much of myself into whatever this thing is, and ultimately all anyone seems to care about is this other thing. That's not just me. I know I'm in a very unusual and unique set of circumstances, but I have lots of other female friends who'll be like, I gave a presentation, it was 20 minutes long, and someone just said, oh, like, why are you wearing that weird pantsuit? And they were like, that's what you took away from 20 minutes of what I just said? You know, it's like, it's really hard. So I think that's a tough one. I think that's a really tough. I went to college and I was genuinely kind of like, well, I'm gonna go study and then I'll kind of like, I'll see what happens. And then Steve sent me the script for Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I went and I sat down with him. This makes sense. Like, I don't want to spend my time doing anything other than making sure that this movie gets coming out of Harry Potter, whether I was going to feel that way about anything else for a long time. You know, I had loved performing and I had loved acting, but really a big part of the passion for me was that I just loved those stories and I wanted to be part of that world, and I loved who that character was. And it wasn't so much for me about the idea of being an actress. It was the idea of, like, I just want to be part of this. And Perks and working with Steve and feeling that I'm writing about something that I'm either so angry or so passionate about that it kind of just comes out. And I put it all down on paper. It's therapy, and it's like trying to work things out in my own mind and trying to understand. It's trying to understand better what's going on in here. For me, I think my big like aha moment, or my big feeling of like, wow, there's like this whole cavalry that are coming to my support and women that I can call and try to make sense of things, was more when I became a part of the feminist movement, and it was meeting people like Gloria Steinem and Sheryl Sandberg and Bell Hooks and, you know, and Eve Ensler and Caitlin Moran. It's really the women whose books I started reading and then was fortunate enough to meet and speak to, who made me feel that something that a set of circumstances I had been taking very personally were in fact not personal at all, but actually part of a systematic and much larger and bigger thing than myself. When anything comes under pressure, when anything is difficult, one of the first things to go, or one of the first things that tends to be attacked, when people is women's rights, is women's reproductive rights. Women's liberty is one of the first things that people try to curtail. It's an easy way to try and feel that things are being better controlled if women are kept nicely and neatly in their place. Because there are fewer role models, because we see fewer women doing it, I think fewer women are able to see themselves doing it, have the confidence to see that they could do it, think they can do it. So it's partly internal, and then I think it's also external. There's just a blanket level of prejudice about women's capacities in that role, and just a lack of confidence of just like, I'm going to give you that check for X million dollars to go and make this movie. There's a gap there that doesn't seem to be able to be bridged. I don't know if it's a trust, you know, I don't know what it is. This is a movie about buildings exploding and fights and superheroes, so a woman can't direct that. This has to have a man directing it because it's about explosions and fights and stuff, so only a guy can do that. It's like, you know, there's just kind of there's a way that things have been done for a very long time, and you know, you almost need to like open up new neural pathways in people's minds. You need to expand people's vision. You need to get people out of comfortable habits and patterns in order to see new possibilities. You know, it's also handing over potentially huge amounts of information And information is power. I think even more than money, in a way, is kind of, he has an amazing way of explaining things that doesn't make it feel like your civil liberties are being taken out of your hands. He's kind of perfect for the role because he's so charming. As so much of this stuff is, it's shiny and exciting, and you turn on your phone and you get this big dopamine hit. It's really addictive. I really draw a super conscious line between what is public and what is private. And that has kind of helped me maintain a certain degree of sanity, because having people wade in and give an opinion on absolutely everything about me would just destroy me as a human being. I would not be able to, I would just be a shell of a human. Censoring yourself and watching yourself, and also I notice so